My name is Mumia Abu Jamal. I'm a journalist, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and an African American. I live in the fastest growing public housing tract in America. In 1981, I was a reporter for WUHY and president of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. Currently, I'm a writer and a public radio commentator. I've been a resident on Pennsylvania's death row for 11 years. Tune in to hear my regular reports. From death row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal on your public radio station.
That recording was withdrawn from broadcast on National Public Radio after protests by the police. It was recorded by a man who faces death by execution. While a number of people believe this sentence is just, a growing number believe he deserves a new trial.
First reports of the shooting of Officer Daniel Faulkner came just before 4 this morning. But by the time his mother Mary and brother Ken arrived at Jefferson Hospital, he had already died of multiple gunshot wounds. Police say that it was Philadelphia radio reporter Mumia Abu Jamal who pulled the trigger, but no one seems to know why.
At 4 a.m. on December 9th, 1981, Jamal was driving his cab in the Philadelphia red light district. At a crossroads, he saw his brother William in a physical confrontation with policeman Daniel Faulkner. Jamal ran across the street to intervene. Several shots were heard. Both Faulkner and Jamal were shot. Jamal and Faulkner were taken to the hospital. The doctor in charge that night was Dr. Anthony Coletta.
I had done everything I could for Officer Faulkner, and that he was dead or dying, and I needed to leave him and move on to Mr. Jamal, who also seemed to be quite mortally injured. I felt very much alone. I had left a situation where there was a great deal of drama and many people attending to Daniel Faulkner, and it seemed to me, and it remains a very vivid memory to me, that I seemed very much alone as I began to resuscitate Mr. Jamal. He was afraid of me in the beginning, and as his surgeon and the physician responsible for his resuscitation, I needed to explain to him that he wasn't really sure at that point, I think at time, who was a friend and who was a foe. I asked him his name. I tried to calm him down. I told him who I was, and that I thought he was very seriously injured, and that I was there to do everything I could to save his life.
I honestly would have walked past Mumia because I would not have been able to recognize him. I mean, his forehead was gashed open and there was old blood. His lips was busted open and swollen, and there were police officers in the room, and they had guns aimed on Mumia. Mumia was unconscious, and I shook his shoulder and tried to arouse him, and he said, "I'm innocent. I'm innocent. They're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill me."
6 months later, in the summer of 1982, Jamal had recovered from his wounds and was put on trial in the Central Courthouse in Philadelphia. When the trial began, Jamal's supporters thought the cards were stacked against him from the start, as he and his court-appointed lawyer faced a formidable array of prosecution witnesses and state ballistics and forensic officials, while in contrast, there were minimal resources to mount the defense.
If you're court-appointed in Philadelphia, you're given a limited amount of money to do an enormous amount of things. I think when all was totaled up, I think for investigator, ballistics, pathologists, and other professional services, there was perhaps less than $1,000 that was used and approved by the court.
Judge Albert Sabo, the judge appointed to try the case, was known among court officials as the prosecutor's friend and in the press as the hanging judge.
Judge Sabo sets a prosecutorial tone, a conviction tone to the trial. He sets the tone to the extent that a prosecutor or defense lawyer tries to impact on the tone of a trial. The judge makes the rulings, and that ruling, as a result, sets where you go from that point on.
The first stage of the trial was jury selection. Under Pennsylvania law, at a trial that can result in a death sentence, potential jurors can be successfully challenged and removed if they do not believe in capital punishment. The prosecution initially excluded more than half of the jury pool on the basis that they didn't believe in the death penalty. Many of these potential jurors were black. The prosecution then used its peremptory challenges to exclude 11 other black jurors. The jury finally contained only 2 black jurors from a city that was 40% black. But more was to come. Jamal's frustration with what was happening finally exploded when the judge stopped him from further representing himself at the trial, citing his intimidating behavior in the jury selection stage as the reason.
Well, you know, they always tried to paint Mumia as some wild creature, you know, out of control. And in fact, Mumia was in control as much as he could be. And usually Mumia was trying to make a point when they asked him to be removed from the courtroom. When people were trying to take your life, you don't go, oh, excuse me, should I do this or shouldn't I do that? I mean, I'm not going to be timid if I'm fighting for my piece of bread. So we're talking life here.
The prosecution's case put forward at the trial was that Officer Faulkner stopped Jamal's brother's car at the corner of 13th Street and Locust. When the brother got out of the car, there was an argument. Faulkner was seen to hit the brother. Jamal ran across the street from the parking lot opposite.
The gun was found on the ground. It was Mumia's gun. It was licensed to him. He had purchased it. He had been robbed twice, as recently as 3 nights before this happened. And he was carrying a gun for his own protection. But that gun was a .38 caliber. And the bullet that was removed from Officer Faulkner, if you accept the word of the medical examiner, was a .44 caliber.
This inconsistency from the medical examiner's report was never introduced at the trial. The report shows that he recorded that the bullet that hit Officer Faulkner in the head was a .44 caliber shot. He would later claim that this was a preliminary report. The prosecution would add that the measurement of the bullet in the ballistics report was consistent with a .38 and not a .44. However, there was no definitive match. The defense contends that since the bullet was fragmented and one piece was lost after the autopsy, the caliber of the bullet is now impossible to identify. In addition to this, there were no fingerprints on the gun.
Also, although the gun was found there, the prosecution was unable to connect that gun to the murder itself. They did not check the gun to see if it had been recently fired. That could have easily been accomplished. They did not check Mumia's hands to see if he had any lead residue. They did not do a neutron activation test. So in short, the prosecution benefited by the fact that Mumia, an all-night cab driver, had a gun, but they were unable to connect the gun to the murder itself.
The prosecution's expert maintained that Jamal fired the first shot into Officer Faulkner's back at close range. He said Jamal was just 12 inches away, but the expert admitted he could find no evidence of gunpowder on the policeman's jacket in his tests. Jamal was unable to counter this testimony with experts of his own. We brought in one of America's top forensic experts who has testified for both the prosecution and the defense in hundreds of trials, Herbert McDonnell. McDonnell tested an identical gun at different distances from the target and found obvious gunpowder traces.
This is the pattern produced at 12 inches, and it continues on, as I have shown and marked, at 24 inches. We still get a lot of powder granules producing this image. If they got no test at all, it would have to be more than 24 inches.
If the prosecution did the tests as they said, and there were no gunpowder traces, the shot in the back seems likely to have been fired from further away. These issues raise additional questions about the certainty of the prosecution's description of events. The other point in the prosecution's forensic evidence was that Jamal was then shot by Faulkner as he fell. But Jamal was hit in the chest and the bullet traveled downwards. How could the policeman have fired at that angle as he fell? One theory put forward at the trial was that there was a ricochet effect, with the bullet hitting a bone and being deflected downwards.
No, I couldn't buy that at all. If the bullet hit a rib, and when you have a high velocity projectile, a jacketed projectile such as this, the deflection of the rib in that area is not going to cause a severe deflection. It might move a degree or two, but we're looking here at perhaps 30 or 40 degrees downward, and I don't believe that could possibly happen.
Such questionable arguments make a number of other scenarios seem just as possible. What does McDonnell make of the forensic work carried out by the police after the shootings?
The fact that they did not even smell of the barrel or the cylinder of the revolver to determine if it had been recently fired, that's not very forensic, that's common sense. They should have done the forensic test, particularly neutron activation swabbing, and they should have done the spatial distribution of gunshot residues. And if they did them, they did not report on them. And those are two fundamental things. But having an expert at the table with counsel would have been very helpful in this case, because I think much of what I have read would have been seriously questioned and perhaps destroyed by a good cross-examination, which could not be affected because there was no forensic scientist there.
The next major issue in the case against Jamal concerns a confession that Jamal is alleged to have made while in the hospital after the shooting. The police still proclaim it as firm evidence of Jamal's guilt.
He bragged about it when he got to the hospital. Despite his alleged brutal treatment, he was sufficiently coherent enough to say, yeah, I shot the MF, and I hope he dies. Well, he got his wish. Then he died.
I walked over to him to see who had just shot and killed my partner, and he had shouted out that I shot the MFer, and I hope he dies. He said it once more, and I leaned over and responded that he shouldn't die, you should.
I would make it clear that I was with Jamal from within a moment or two of him being brought into the emergency room, throughout his entire time in the emergency room and on into intensive care unit, and he neither made any confessions to me, nor did he say anything that would be even remotely in the way of a confession to any other individuals.
You wrote about this in your notes at the time, the confession. How did that come out?
I didn't write any notes at that time. I made no notes.
But you told somebody about it, presumably?
I talked to detectives at a later date and informed them of the statement.
In fact, Officer Bell reported this alleged confession to no one for 2.5 months before he gave a statement to a police colleague that Jamal had confessed. Was the confession story concocted by the police? In interviews with homicide detectives in the days immediately after the shootings, none of the 15 or so policemen who were in Jamal's immediate vicinity mentioned a confession. Indeed, one police officer, Gary Waxhaw, who was with Jamal in the hospital after the shooting, reported that, quote, the Negro male made no comments. During a recent hearing, Gary Waxhaw claimed that in spite of his statement that night, he too had heard Jamal's confession, but he was too upset to report it at the time, and, like Gary Bell, had only seen fit to mention it more than 2 months later. When it came to the trial, the defense failed to get this officer into court to testify. Only at the last moment did they ask to call him. They were told he was unavailable because he was on vacation. Judge Sabo refused to grant a continuance to enable Waxhaw to be found, telling Jamal, your attorney and you goofed.
Judge's attitude was he's not available, he's on vacation. Tough. I don't think that the judge had any more concern about that witness being available than anyone else. I think that it's like, well, if you can't make sure that you have the witnesses available, or if you can't find out where witnesses live, if you can't find out the names and identities of witnesses, tough.
At 4 a.m. on December 9, 1981, there were no streetlights on the corner of the street where the incident happened, only the light of the police car. There was a lot of confusion about what the witnesses actually saw. Cynthia White was the prosecution's chief eyewitness. She claimed she was standing on the corner close to the incident. But another witness, Desi Hightower, insists that Cynthia White was not where she says she was at all.
When I spotted her positioning was at least a half a block from the corner of the incident, at least a half a block. She was standing in the middle of that block when I glanced over and looked at her.
Cynthia, young, unfortunate woman, 38 arrests for prostitution. She had 3 open cases that were still in the process of being worked on. She was serving 18 months for prostitution arrest in Boston. We have 2 witnesses. One has her moments before, a half a block away. Another witness has her just as the shooting was breaking out down the street, and that she came running up afterwards and asked people what happened. As you know, someone testified during the trial, Veronica Jones, another prostitute, who said that she was offered the same deal as Cynthia by the police, that if she would finger Mumia as the shooter of Officer Faulkner, she could work her corner without molestation from the police. We now know that Cynthia continued to work her corner after this case, and that she was protected by 2 undercover police officers while she was doing it.
The witnesses were not nuns and priests. Normally, nuns and priests are not down at 13th and Locust at 4 a.m. You have to deal the hand that you're given in terms of the nature of the witnesses. However, given that, I'll certainly admit that one of the witnesses, a prostitute, had several arrests. I think it was 18. She was, at the time of trial, she was, I think there was an arrest outstanding for her. All of that was explored. All of that was put before the jury. So it's like anything. That is why you have a jury system. They make the determination. Another individual may have been drinking at some time or other, if I can recall that. A few of the others seemed to be fine. That, however, was not kept from the jury in any way, shape, or form.
But transcripts of the trial show that when the prostitute Veronica Jones referred to the police offering a deal if she corroborated Cynthia White's story, the prosecutor objected. She said, "They were trying to get me to say something the other girl said." Veronica Jones was one of 4 eyewitnesses who in their initial statements said they saw someone running from the scene. But when Jones got to court, she denied having said it. She had a police record, as did another witness who changed his story. In fact, the only one of these 4 to come to court and stand by his original statement was Desi Hightower.
When I heard the shots, I stayed behind the wall for some odd seconds till the shots ceased. And as I turned on the 13th Street, I seen a gentleman fleeing from the scene by the movement of his hair, and it looked like it was dreadlocks. He was moving pretty fast. This happened right before the police pulled up, and Jamal was on the ground. So when the police came up, they just started to attack him. And the other gentleman, and if it was a man, it looked to be a man, the statue to build, had already fled the scene.
With the other witnesses changing their stories, who could corroborate Desi Hightower? There was another witness, Debbie Kurdansky. In her statement to the police on the night of the shooting, she testified that she heard the shots and police sirens, and looking out of the window, saw a man running down the south side of Locust Street. But Jamal's defense only started to pursue her as a witness during the trial.
We get her statement, we have her name. Her address is then cut out. There's a hole in the sheet. As it turned out, we could never get her address. We asked the prosecution. In fact, the prosecution would not give us her address. Look, it may have been that if I had her address, I went out and talked to her, she'd say, no, I don't want to talk to you. Maybe. But why would the prosecution not take that chance? The prosecution prevented that opportunity from happening. Why, I don't know.
However, police say they routinely remove witnesses' addresses. When Jackson was given Debbie Kardansky's phone number by the prosecutor, she told Jackson she had recently been in an accident and felt she was in no condition to testify.
This woman would be straight down the middle. She had no prosecutorial bent or defense bent. She was a white woman in her middle ages. I've since learned all of these things. And she lived at the hotel, didn't know Mumia, didn't know the police, said, hey, I heard a shot. I looked out the window and I saw someone run. There is little likelihood that she's going to make it up or lie. She said that. It never got into testimony. It never corroborated what Desi Hightower said. So what Desi Hightower said was an aberration and something the jury perhaps just easily discounted.
Because they wanted Mumia and they were satisfied with Mumia, they never pursued the third man that all the witnesses talked about. So I strongly believe that the third person that ran from the scene is the one responsible for shooting Officer Faulkner.
I told the state, I told the world what I seen that night, and that's what I seen. I'm not lying for him, and I wouldn't lie against him. I'm just simply telling the truth.
With questions about the forensics, the confession, the witnesses, what of the man at the center of it all, Mumia Abu Jamal? During the last 14 years, he has been struggling to get his word out in dispatches from death row to newspapers and journals across America, culminating in a book, Live from Death Row, published last year. This made him one of death row's most celebrated inhabitants, but also one of the most unpopular with the authorities, who then tried to silence him altogether and stop all communication with the media. After several attempts, we finally got into the prison to film Jamal's first television interview after he took the authorities to court over this issue. What does Jamal say now about the murder of Officer Faulkner?
I am absolutely innocent of the charge I was charged of. I'm absolutely not guilty of the charges I were convicted of.
How did you feel at the point, when you were handed a death sentence back in 1982?
Well, I guess angry, intensely angry. A feeling of injustice that rankled to the core of my soul. Anger, injustice, outrage, fear, mixed emotions from the whole world, but a certainty that it would not stand, a certainty that it would be overturned. I still feel that.
By 1981, the year of Faulkner's murder, Jamal was an award-winning freelance journalist and broadcaster, but even so, he needed to supplement his income.
Anyone who's ever written freelance knows that you're poorly paid, if ever, if at all. And I was doing stringer work for several stations. I was driving a cab to make money to support my family.
You at some point decided you needed a gun to protect you. Could you tell us about that?
Well, I would wager that 85% of all cabbies in America ride armed. If they don't, well, sometimes they don't come back from their shift. I've been robbed before, I recall vividly, even now, the experience of picking up a fare, going to a site, looking in the mirror, and seeing a man behind me with a 380, or 45, I remember, a semi-automatic weapon behind me. You don't forget about that, That becomes a necessity of that job,
Faced with what he regarded as a hostile judge who refused him his right to represent himself, Jamal never gave his account of the events of December 9th, 1981 at the trial. In an impassioned statement at the trial, he rejected the opportunity to take the stand, saying he wanted all of his rights, not some of them. Now, in the process of seeking an appeal, Jamal has decided not to give a full account at this stage. The nearest he has got to describing what happened that night is in his recent book. In a passage of surreal, almost abstract prose, Jamal describes his sensation of moving in and out of consciousness after he was shot.
I'm sleeping, sort of. It has the languorous feel of sleep with none of the rest. Time seems slower, easier, less oppressive. I feel strangely light. I look down and see a man slumped on the curb, his head resting on his chest, his face downcast. Damn, that's me. A jolt of recognition ripples through me. A cop walks up to the man and kicks him in the face. I feel it, but don't feel it. 3 cops join the dance, kicking, blackjacking the bloody, handcuffed, fallen form. 2 grab each arm, pull the man head first into a steel utility pole. He falls. Daddy, yes, baby girl. Why are those men beating on you like that? Oh, it's okay, baby girl, I'm okay. But why, Daddy? Why did they shoot you, and why are they hitting and kicking you, Abu? Well, they've been wanting to do this for a long time, baby girl. But don't worry, Daddy's fine. See? I don't even feel it. Consciousness returns to find me cuffed, my breath sweet with a heavy metallic taste of blood in darkness. I lie on the paddy wagon floor and am informed by the anonymous crackle of the radio. I feel no pain, just the omnipresent pressure that makes every bloody breath a labor. I am en route to the police administration building, presumably on the way to die.
So in that piece you've written about your fear during that event that surfaced as you surfaced in consciousness, that fear of what was the fear there?
Well, the fear of being separated from one's loved ones, the fear of pain, the fear of prison, the fear of the loss of one's liberty and freedom. All of those fears perhaps rolled into one. The fear of being placed at the tender mercies of a city's judiciary that I knew was far from just. The fear of a life turned topsy-turvy and never to be the same, All of those fears rolled into one.
Were his fears confirmed when he was brought to trial in front of Judge Sabo?
People make much of the fact that I chose to represent myself, but from the first day of the trial, in fact, I never represented myself. I wasn't allowed to represent myself. I was removed from self-representation. We hear and I've read, of course, and I'm sure you have, that I was disruptive throughout the proceeding. Well, my disruption, such that it was that, consisted of asking questions, standing up, asking questions of witnesses, and trying to argue to the jury my case in which my life was in the balance. Every motion that was made by the defense was denied. Every suggestion that was made by the prosecution was followed. Every motion they made was granted. His Honor, Judge Sabo, was, he tells us, for a few years, a member of the FOP, which stands for the Fraternal Order of Police. He argued, or he explained from the bench, that this was an irrelevant fact. Oh, I've only been a member for a few years. Well, contrast that with the fact that I'd only been a member of the Black Panther Party for a few years, for 2 or 3 years. This was argued to the jury as a basis and a justification for not just premeditation to commit murder, but a justification for them to execute me.
Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun.
In 1969, at the age of 15, Jamal had been the Minister of Information for the Philadelphia branch of the Black Panther Party. At the sentencing phase of the trial, when the jury was being asked to determine Jamal's fate, the prosecutor argued that Jamal should be sentenced to death. To support this view, he quoted from a newspaper interview given by Jamal when he was a 15-year-old Black Panther.
Well, Mumia had indicated in this 1970 interview that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. It was never intended and wasn't used in that article or by Mumia as meaning anything in terms of Panther policy or activity. It was a historical analysis and a very powerful one. Mumia made that same statement and explained it in the same way before the jury, separate and apart from the article, explained that America was based on the slaughter of the Indians and the establishment of slavery. And these were examples of political power grows out of the barrel of the gun. It was not a question of tactics to be used by the Panthers or any personal ideology that he held. The prosecutor, Joe McGill, totally reversed Mumia's intent and the meaning of it to argue that Mumia was a cop killer or somebody who believed the police should have been killed. And this was a total misstatement.
The fact that he adopted and wrote an article in which he stated and adopted the statement of Mao Zedong that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. And so in an attempt to cross-examine him, I asked him if he adopted that statement, and I believe he did on cross-examination, said he still believed that at this point. But he wanted to read the entire article. He says, you just gave a few part of the article. Let me read the whole article. Let me read it. And then the Judge Sabo said, well, if he wants to read the whole article, let him do it, Mr. McGill. And then I said, all right, yes, sir. And then he agreed, and he read the whole thing, which showed the specific theory and policy of that particular group, which was self-defense against what they believed to be police trying to kill them and so forth. This was all done, as the Supreme Court said, for the purposes of rebutting his good character testimony and also rebutting the issue of whether or not the police were attempting to kill him or having some sort of a grand conspiracy, not to merely find the person who killed Danny Faulkner, but to kill him as if he was so special or something.
But it has recently come to light that the FBI thought Jamal was pretty special. Assisted by the Philadelphia police, they had been keeping Jamal under surveillance from the age of 15, when he was Minister of Information for the Philadelphia Black Panther Party. Indeed, they compiled an 800-page file on him, and they continued their surveillance when he was a radio journalist in the 70s.
Hit them on the head. Kicking them on
And
the
in
head.
1978, when the police laid siege to the house of a black radical group known as MOVE, Mumia Abu Jamal's journalistic reports were highly critical of the brutality shown by the police in making their arrests. But none of this got into the trial. The sentencing hearing lasted only 3 hours, and in due course, Judge Sabo, who has presided over more trials that have resulted in death sentences than any other judge in America, confirmed the punishment handed down by the jury and sentenced Jamal to death. For the last 14 years, while going through the tortuously slow appeals process, Jamal has been locked away in Pennsylvania's death row, always handcuffed whenever he leaves his cell, and his only contact with visitors through a plexiglass window.
The term that I like to use for SAI Green is a bright, shining hell. It's brand new, over $200 million construction. The cells are similar in a sense to this very room. Once someone closes that door, there is no sound. There's the sound of silence in your cell. It is difficult, verging on the impossible, for you to conduct a conversation with anyone other than the man who is directly adjacent to you, right next to you, in fact. Because there are no bars. There is no ambient sound. There is the sound of an air conditioner and the sound of silence, or the sound you create in your own cell. So the sense of isolation is all but total, you see, because you're cut off from even the sonic presence of people, you see. Imagine someone going in your bathroom, locking the door behind you, and not leaving that bathroom except for 1 hour or 2 hours every 24-hour daily cycle. And when one leaves that bathroom, being shackled, handcuffed, and escorted by armed guards with batons to a cage, and then returning to that bathroom after 1 hour or 2 hours in the cage, and staying in that bathroom for the rest of your natural life with a date to die.
In 1995, after 32 years of no executions on Pennsylvania's death row, Tom Ridge, the new Republican governor, ordered several executions to be carried out. The first went ahead in May, quickly followed by the second.
But it's a part of the job that I believe that must be done.
In June, Governor Ridge announced that Jamal would be executed by lethal injection on August 17, 1995.
About 9:45 a.m. on June the 2nd, I was in the law library with another man. So I was sitting there typing, and a guard I knew came up and said, Jamal, would you come to the door? And I looked at him, and I wondered why. I said, well, what's up? And he says, Lieutenant wants to see you. Well, I felt something, you know. It's extraordinarily rare for what we call a white shirt. All commissioned officers, lieutenants, and captains wear white shirts, unlike sergeants who wear the regular institutional gray. It's real rare for a white shirt to talk to a prisoner. So something told me, oh, well. So I walked to the door, and this lieutenant, who I'd never seen before, said, I am Lieutenant so-and-so, and your death warrant has been signed. Would you place your hands out? We're going to cuff you, strip you, and send you to phase 2. I turned to the man that I was in the law library with, and I said, look, grab my legal stuff, because I brought some stuff with me. And the lieutenant said, don't worry about that, we'll take care of it. I said, oh boy, here it goes. When I got to the actual cell, the lieutenant pulled out the warrant and read it to me, or read the letter from the commissioner. Of course, I was stunned. I mean, not only the timing, but, it was well known that we were only days away from filing a petition. In fact, a weekend away from filing a petition in the Court of Common Pleas for a new trial. So I began talking with some of the men in the area, men who had warrants prior to mine who had, other dates to die. Some I knew, some I did not, because they come from other parts of the state. But it was a time of intentional, state-inflicted terror. Designed to kill the spirit and eventually to kill the body.
With this threat hanging over him, Jamal's lawyers had petitioned the court for a retrial, but the special hearing held to consider Jamal's claims was presided over by the very same Judge Sabo, the judge at the original trial. At the hearing, this time the medical examiner was questioned as to why he had recorded the bullet found in Officer Faulkner as a .44 caliber. He could not recall or explain his reason for the notation, but described the report as an intermediate work product and said he was not a ballistics expert. This time, too, the witness Debbie Krodansky came to court, but she said she could remember none of the detail of what she had seen. New witnesses came forward, too. One of the most intriguing but also most puzzling was William Singletary, a businessman and Vietnam veteran. Although he was present on Locust Street at the time of the event, Singletary was never asked to be part of the trial. Singletary claims he was returning to his parked car from a club when he saw a Volkswagen being driven the wrong way down Locust Street.
The police officer stopped the car, jumped out. The gentleman in Volkswagen met him. They had a brief confrontation. The cop had the guy to go up against the wall. As he went up against the wall, they was back and forth, verbal, talking back and forth, back and forth. And a guy was in the car, passenger. He jumped out, hollered some obscenities, and the police officer turned as is to say to him, get back in the car or something. And the guy pulled a handgun, and when he reached in his pocket and pulled a handgun, I just went behind the subway to get cover, more or less, because I figured it was a gun. And I heard a popping sound. I ducked. Then I saw the guy point the gun directly at the cop's face, and then I saw the fire from the barrel hit the cop directly in the face. The guy turned around, looked at me, and then he turned the other way, placed the gun in the Volkswagen, took off running east on Locust Street. Another person appeared, and he asked me where was the guy driving the Volkswagen. I said he took off running down the street. He says, what happened here? I said, a police officer got shot. He said, oh my God, we don't need this. He walked toward the police officer, threw his hands up in the air, and as he leaned over to ask the cop, he says, is there anything I could do? And the cop's gun discharged, hit him in his chest, knocks him against the Volkswagen. And now we got two people that's been wounded, and I'm standing there, I don't know what to do. And then white shirt police officers came, and they tried to get assistance for both of the people that had been wounded.
William Singletary was then taken by the police down to their headquarters to make a statement.
I remember clearly what I wrote, exactly what I told you, what I saw. I wrote it, and they said it wasn't good enough, it wasn't correct. They destroyed it, and I wrote it again. I did this over repeatedly for 4 times I did this, like 2 or 3 pages each time, and they would destroy it each time. While I was there, was one police officer sitting there. He had a little slapstick he kept hitting his hand. The other guy was standing behind me. He had one. They kept kicking the chair. I was threatened to be beat up. My parents were going to be harmed. My business was going to be destroyed. Everything that I worked for all of my life was going down the tubes. I was told, basically, this guy's not worth it. He's a scum of the earth. I don't know why you taking up for him. You know, we know who did the shooting. Look, we got this guy. we're going to put him away. You're going to do what we tell you to do, or you won't be no good in the city. I wasn't going to let them beat me up, but I knew if I hit one of them or something happened, I'd go to jail for some other charges or something I hadn't done. So when he gave me the offer to write something, I wrote, he told me what to write. He told me word for word, that's what I wrote, that's what the guy typed on the paper. I signed the paper, 2 sheets, and I left. As I left, I felt like a lady would have felt if she was raped. I just felt violated. I knew what I did wasn't right. I knew everything that I had stood for was down the tubes, and I felt real bad about it. And I knew this other person was being wrongly, falsely accused for something he didn't know. He never knew what happened. I've met to several people that I knew, and they told me, so you just leave it alone. The guy's in jail, just leave it alone. But I couldn't rest because I knew what was wrong was wrong.
Is William Singletary's account the truth of what happened? There are some questions. Singletary had first come forward and given a sworn deposition to Jamal's lawyer in 1990. One problem is that the story he told then differed in some important respects from his account today, although some argue that his memory might be hazy after 14 years. In 1990, he described Faulkner being shot in the face with 1 shot. Now he says he actually heard another shot before seeing the shot in the face. In 1990, he described Faulkner pulling his revolver before shooting, in spite of being shot in the face and incapacitated. Now he says the gun just discharged as Jamal bent over Faulkner. He also said in both accounts that the felled officer spoke, but medical experts agreed this was impossible. In both accounts, he describes the shooter having a .22 caliber gun, which he left under the Volkswagen, but the police never reported finding a third gun, and there were other inconsistencies in Singletary's testimony. When he told his story to Judge Sabo at the hearing, the judge found it unbelievable. Those who believe Singletary cite his unblemished record as a Vietnam veteran and businessman, and the fact that he was an eyewitness that night who did not know Jamal and had no apparent reason to lie. They also believe that Singletary's testimony deserves to be heard by a jury.
23 times a police department has been sued and 23 times it has lost. And now a new wave of controversy, the crimes of a half-dozen members of the elite highway patrol, are bringing to the surface questions about the honesty of 6,000 men and women behind the badge. Philadelphia is the only city in the United States sued by the Justice Department for brutality and corruption. Now the questions of evidence tampering, poor discipline, and the failure to hold those sworn to protect and serve to the law they are hired to enforce are at play again.
Recent scandals rocking the Philadelphia police involving the fabrication of evidence and coercion of witnesses have raised new doubts about cases like Jamal's involving police evidence in the past. Then what about the troubling question surrounding the police and their allegation that Jamal confessed in the hospital, produced more than 2 months after the actual shooting?
Why would it take over 60 days for the police to say so? I mean, if that were so in any city, not just in Philadelphia, why wasn't that on the headlines the next day? Did every policeman in there forget about it? No, I did not confess in any hospital. In fact, there was a meeting in February or perhaps March where the DA in the police administration building asked policemen there, saying, well, anybody got any confessions? A moment of silence and a few hands go up. This was testified to at the hearing. The fact is, there was no confession.
The result of the special hearing in August 1995 was that Judge Sabo confirmed Jamal's murder conviction and turned down his request for a retrial. However, a few days from the execution date, in a moment of high drama, Sabo did grant a stay of execution. The next step was for Jamal to appeal against Sabo's retrial decision. If that failed, he would be given a new execution date.
I was standing on the corner of 12th and Locust, just chit-chatting, girl talk, and then we heard gunshots, like, pop, pop. And I looked across the street to my left ankle, and I seen this white person falling. And I kept looking, and I seen these two black individuals running away from him. I started to walk towards, but I came back and just got out the area because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. It's the first time I ever seen that, so I couldn't believe it.
So, you're absolutely clear that you saw two people running away?
I'm positive. I am positive.
No question?
No question, no doubt. I'm positive. And regardless of what anybody says, I know what I saw. These eyes don't miss too much. Not too much.
So that's the truth of the matter. The truth is?
I swear, that's the truth.
In 1981, Veronica Jones was a 20-year-old prostitute working the area of downtown Philadelphia. A few days after the murder, she was interviewed by the police, and she then gave a full account of what she had seen that night.
I told them the same exact thing that I seen. I heard gunshots when I turned around and looked around the corner, and I seen the white male falling and the two males jogging away.
Several months after giving this statement, she was under arrest and on remand in jail on a robbery charge.
I got arrested on a felony charge, a robbery charge, and I couldn't make the bail. So I was sitting, and I was visited by two white males in suits, but I was told they were my lawyers. So when I went down, they told me that they were detectives, and they were telling me how they could work a deal with me. They told me all I had to do was name Mumia as the shooter, Mumia Jamal as the shooter, and that they would make sure that I got off on the 15 years, 5 to 15 years, and also any other charges that I was already in there on, which were a number of charges. And they said that they had helped Cynthia White out, so they would help me out also. And you don't know how good that sounds to somebody that's going away for 15 years, not even really knowing the law, And so they promised me, and so I told them, I don't know, I have to think, But they said, all they said was, they would be back. And then one day, they came to get me to go to court. Excuse me. They came to get me to go to court, and I thought I was going to court on my charges. And when I got into the courtroom, I was facing a whole room of police officers. And the two detectives that visited me, they were standing in the far right corner, behind all these other police officers. And there was Mr. Jamal, who I didn't even know, per se, at all. I was totally confused. I didn't know what to say. I'm looking at a man I've never seen in my life that I'm getting ready to lie on. And I'm looking at these officers that can put me away. So I just thought I said I didn't see anything. Sorry.
So, it was a lie?
It was a big lie. A lie that could almost cost somebody their life. And I hope it did.
After her appearance at Jamal's trial in 1982, Veronica Jones was released from jail and sentenced to probation on all her outstanding charges. In gathering evidence for the new hearing in 1995, Jamal's defense team considered Jones a key witness, but couldn't trace her. Then in 1996, they discovered her living in New Jersey, and so opened a new chapter in the case.
When we finally found her in April of 1996, we were quite astounded to learn that there was yet another concrete instance of police coercion. This made very graphic the type of actions that were being taken by the police and prosecution to prevent favorable witnesses from coming forward and testifying on Mumia's behalf.
Veronica Jones now agreed to tell her story at a new hearing, ordered by the state Supreme Court, but presided over once again by Judge Sabo.
It was very difficult because I was trying to leave my past in the past. You know, because once people get a hold of something negative about you, they tend to let it linger. They don't care if you're trying to make a change, they make it linger. And I don't care what you do good, it's always the bad overrides the good to these people. But it was still doing the right thing. I mean, I've got a grandchild on the way, my first. And I've got 2 daughters that are in college, they're doing good. A daughter graduated from high school. Everything positive, but it's that one little ghost in my closet that I had to get rid of. I expected to go in there and just say what I had to say and go home, but it was not that easy.
Even though Judge Sabo warned her that she could face 7 to 14 years for perjury, this time Veronica Jones insisted that she had indeed seen 2 men fleeing the murder scene. She said that she had withheld this evidence at Jamal's trial under pressure from the police. Then the prosecution tried to switch the focus onto Jones' past record of petty crime.
Then they started getting dirty on me. And when I say dirty, I mean they started throwing from left field when I'm right-handed. You understand what I'm saying? I couldn't catch that left ball. I couldn't, it was coming at me at one time, and then it got real dirty and real ugly on me. But it didn't make a difference, because I'm here now. I want to get this off my chest. I want my kids to be able to walk around with their heads up high, because my mom did the right thing, regardless of what people say about her now. As long as it's okay with them, it's okay with me. And I went through with it, and I mean, they dug dirty on me. Yeah, but they couldn't change it because the truth is out. And I was not about to go back on that. I wanted to stick with it because it was right.
Then the prosecution brought up the fact that there was an outstanding arrest warrant against Jones for a $250 bad check.
The bad check thing, this is something that happened back in 90, 91, something like that. And something I wasn't even charged on. All they did was take my picture, put it up on the bulletin board, don't ever do this again. I wasn't fingerprinted, nothing like that. But they had this warrant that I was never aware of. Excuse me. But, okay, I can deal with that. I can work with that. Then there's another old prostitution case from 1982 that I never received. I never received the paper on that. But all these things I never received anything on, all of a sudden it's right in front of my face now that I'm trying to do something right. And if I was still doing the wrong things, I would have never seen those papers.
As she testified, 2 South Jersey detectives were arriving at the Criminal Justice Center. They wanted Veronica Jones on a Gloucester County warrant, claiming she was a fugitive who had tried to pass a bad check in a liquor store. She went from the witness stand to the Philadelphia Police Detention Unit in custody for processing.
This should not have happened, and that it did happen reveals and exposes the prosecution's case from day one till now.
If she broke the law, she faces the consequences of it. This nonsense about police abuse, the only abuse here was the murder of a police officer by a convicted killer and a team of corrupt defense attorneys.
After being arrested in court, Veronica Jones spent a day and a night in jail before being released on $15,000 bail.
What the prosecution did by arresting Veronica literally off the witness stand while she's testifying on Mumia's behalf shows again the extent of the vindictiveness of this prosecution against Mumia Abu-Jamal. If they could do this to Veronica, threaten her with a 4-year-old warrant in court because she came forward to testify for him, if they can do this in open court with press there, with a full courtroom, one can only imagine the types of threats that people were subjected to in police precincts, in the homicide division, and in jail cells when there was nobody looking.
What else can they do to me? They've locked me up. They've dug up more dirt than I can even remember. So there's no more they can do to me. And even if they could, I couldn't change my story if I wanted to because it's the truth. And I want to stick with that.
In his opinion to the state Supreme Court, Judge Sabo totally rejected Veronica Jones' new testimony, describing it as of such an incredible nature as to be of no value. Judge Sabo argued that even if it were true that Veronica Jones saw 2 men running, because she had described seeing the men a few minutes after she heard the shots, the time frame meant that at that stage, Faulkner would already have been shot by Jamal, and so her observations were irrelevant.
Her testimony is critical, not only to support the defense theory that the shooter ran away, but also in showing the extent of misconduct engaged in by this prosecution. What Veronica testified to also lends credence and to the other defense theories and the substantial allegations we have of prosecutorial misconduct. It lends additional support to what was done to Veronica was also done to William Singletary, and perhaps in an even greater degree, causing him to sign a false statement, deny that he actually saw the shooting, leave town. It also helps explain and show that, in fact, it's entirely plausible that the police fabricated this confession that they say Mumia made on as he was literally dying, critically wounded in the hospital. So what Veronica testified to has great impact on the entirety of the evidence that we've presented, as well as on the very specific, real situation that she was in, and that her own false testimony at the trial was the result of police coercion.
I'm quite sure that he has a family just like I do. He wants to be with them just like I didn't want to be taken away from mine for 5 to 15 years. But he's been away from his for 14 years, and I regret waiting this long to tell the truth. And I apologize for doing that. But I'm here now, and I'm going to stick to my story because this is what is the truth. Because I know he wants to be home with his like I am with mine.
Jamal now says that if he can get a retrial before a jury of his peers, he will finally give a full account of the night of December 9th, 1981. But after 14 years and the request for a retrial being turned down by Judge Sabo, the chances of Jamal escaping the lethal injection chamber are looking increasingly slim. 14 years ago, late at night, an officer is in an altercation with a man's brother. Witnesses change their stories of what they saw. Shots are heard, but who is to say what the exact circumstances really were? All we know for certain is that a police officer was killed in the line of duty. A widow and a family continue to grieve. And yet, was American justice really served? Is this man, Mumia Abu-Jamal, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt?
I still get the sense that you have some belief in justice, in American justice.
That sounds very naive, I know. Well, I have to, yes. You know, I know it sounds stupid, it sounds naive, but I have to. I mean, that's the only way one can survive.